This is intended to be a brief DJJ referral packet training. We're going to talk about the materials you'll be receiving, including the YASI and how to understand it. In order to make this more widely available, we are going to save it as an MP4 and post it, and I'll be sending a link afterward. To get started, we're going to cover the referral requirements per DJJ policy. We're going to talk about interpreting the YASI score and implications for programming, the YASI pre-screen score, who gets that, and where will it be entered in NC Allies, where is the pre-screen score found in NC Join, the YASI pre-screen versus full assessment and the differences in the two, the YASI wheel, and how you may use that as a program to help you plan for the participants that you'll be serving, and then service plan contents, which would include YASI goals and objectives. For those of you who have started to receive the YASI pre-screen and other materials that are being sent now for DJJ referrals from court services, I wanted to cover quickly the continued use of the North Carolina Assessment of Risk. If you will remember, the implementation for the YASI was January 1st. That means that any that were on caseload who received the North Carolina Assessment of Risk and the North Carolina Needs Assessment instrument in December as part of their regular case planning would not be due for another assessment until March of 2021. So very shortly we'll be coming up on the reassessment of many of the juveniles who may have already been on caseload, and after that time, of course, the YASI will be used. To refresh your memory about our fall training on risk assessment, YASI stands for the Youth Assessment Screening Instrument. The pre-screen is a much shorter version of the full YASI assessment. It's about a third of the questions, and it will be used for all juveniles at intake. Anyone scoring more than low risk on that assessment pre-screen will get the full assessment. Also, the YASI wheel. What is so great about that, and how is that going to help you as a program? The YASI wheel provides information about the juvenile's risk. It talks about whether or not the juvenile is low, moderate, or high risk. And it also gives some pointers about something that we've never collected regular information on in the past, and that would be the youth and actual family strengths, things they're interested in, incentives that they're interested in and have value for. These are things we've really never collected in any kind of organized way, and the YASI actually enables us to do that and then look at those strengths and build on them. So now that we've arrived, how does all this work? What will be the flow of work, and how will we put all this together to make better outcomes for children and families? We need to start with the Court Services Policy Memo that went out somewhere around mid-December 2020, stating that effective on January 1st, 2021, there would be process changes that would be required for clients that are referred by juvenile court counselors to programs funded through juvenile community programs, and that's intended to include JCPC-funded programs as well as contractual programs. For youth placed on a diversion, a completed Juvenile Crime Prevention Council Universal Referral Form, a copy of the completed YASI pre-screen assessment tool along with the YASI wheel and the YASI pre-screen summary, a signed copy of Court Services Consent for Release of Information form, that could be the behavioral or the community programs version, the family data sheet, including all integrated aspects of the YASI assessment tool. We'll talk about the family data sheet in just a few more minutes. Additionally, for those youth that are approved for court or those who were moderate to high risk on the YASI pre-screen, you would have the same referral requirements, except this time you would be receiving the full YASI assessment tool along with the YASI wheel and the YASI summary. Just a few pointers about the Universal Referral Form. This form was upgraded in November of 2020 and distributed with the risk assessment training. There are several new fields, and I'm just going to point those out really quickly. You'll see in the center of the screen that the YASI pre-screen score is a new field. It's been circled. What you are looking for there is the numeric YASI pre-screen score. When you go into NC Allies, the field in NC Allies will only take a numeric value, and in turn it will return, based on the number of points you put in that field, it will return low, moderate, or high. You will no longer see risk level 1 through 5 as you did previously. The YASI point ranges are very different from the North Carolina Assessment of Risk, and they also differ by the gender of the juvenile. We may still see some old risk assessments if the juvenile that is being referred to your program was not due for a new YASI assessment. In other words, if he's had the North Carolina Assessment of Risk in the last 90 days, he may not be due, or she may not be due, for the new YASI assessment until sometime in March. The North Carolina Assessment of Risk field in Allies now also displays low, medium, or high, and those point values are consistent with the same point values that you see in the Standardized Program Evaluation Protocol. 0 to 2 is considered low risk, 3 to 12 is considered medium, or what we would say if you were comparing it to YASI, moderate risk, and then 13 to 30 would be high risk. But please remember, all admissions to JCPC programs must have a North Carolina Assessment of Risk completed on them. That field remains only active for 30 days, so you must enter a valid North Carolina Assessment of Risk score within that 30-day window, and you are now assessing all 9 questions, risk 1 through 9. So we're going to look at a couple of additional questions that are on the risk, the referral form that will help you complete that risk assessment. Since JCPC programs are doing the full North Carolina Assessment of Risk, these 2 prior history questions are now provided on the referral form. These 2 questions are not represented in the information collected in the YASI pre-screen, and therefore you would need to request that information on the referral form itself. The questions correspond to the most serious prior adjudication and the most serious prior assaults, if any. This information will be provided on the referral form for any DJJ referrals. If you are doing the same referral process with a juvenile who has prior court history, then you're going to need the consent for release of court history. We'll talk about a little bit more in detail very quickly in just a few minutes. And when completing the full NCAR, you'll need to refer to these questions in addition to what you see in the YASI pre-screen in order to accurately complete risk questions 1 through 9 of the North Carolina Assessment of Risk. For some of you who are curious about why we're still using that instrument, it is because of the Standardized Program Evaluation Protocol. We need a consistent risk tool that is used for all juveniles that enter our programs as part of that evaluation model. We need one that will work for the juvenile who's being referred from the community who has no prior court history, as well as one that will capture risk level of a juvenile who does have prior history with the court, who has actual answers to questions R1 through 4. So we decided to keep the North Carolina Assessment of Risk, at least for the foreseeable future, so we would have a consistent tool for our use with developing risk levels for our SPEP scores. Final reminders. If a juvenile is referred to programming that has DJJ court history, but is not being referred by court services, you'll need to get the consent for release of court history I mentioned a minute ago. The consent for release of court history form would be signed by the parent or guardian for any minor, or if the participant is over 18, they can sign for themselves. Provide that form to the DJJ district where the juvenile was served in order to obtain information on the form. If you need a copy of this form and didn't attend the November training or receive those attachments, please let your consultant know so one can be provided for you. So what does the YASI score actually mean? What does the numeric value indicate? The YASI pre-screen questions are pre-selected from among the full YASI questions. If a juvenile scores moderate to high, or if they are going to be adjudicated and on caseload, the full YASI will be completed on those juveniles. But if only scoring low on the YASI pre-screen, that is all that will be completed. The YASI pre-screen score is what gets entered into NC Allies. That's why that field is found on the referral form, because everyone will get the YASI pre-screen. Not everyone will receive the full YASI assessment. Just a couple of interesting points about YASI and where that actual numeric score resides. It's important to remember that when completing the YASI assessment, juvenile court counselor is directed away from NC Join and over into the casework software. When you print the YASI outputs from the casework software, nowhere is there found a numeric score in Caseworks. Those numeric values can only be found in NC Join. The YASI pre-screen score only is found in NC Join in a couple of different places, and we'll look at those in just a minute. But for the purposes of case planning, when you put in the numeric value into the NC Allies field for the YASI score, it's going to return a value of low, moderate, or high. And you will also see those same values in the YASI wheel, the YASI pre-screen, and the full YASI assessment. So low, moderate, and high is very relevant for you when making plans for participants in your programs. As stated earlier, the Court Services Memo as well as the Community Programs Memo from December of 2020 set forth the requirements for referrals from Court Services to JCPC and contractual programs. The Universal Referral Form has been updated November of 2020 and includes the additional fields that are necessary for the program to be able to obtain the information to complete the full risk assessment R1 through 9 on those juveniles that are being referred to their programs, as well as the information on the YASI pre-screen numeric score. That field has also been added. The consent for release is provided because that gives the Court Services Office permission from the juvenile and parent to provide this information over to the program. You may see the behavioral health or the community programs version of that consent for release. Either one is fine. The YASI pre-screen or full assessment, if that is indicated, the YASI wheel and the return of that visual wheel, the service plan, if applicable, for any juvenile that's going to be on caseload, and just give yourself a little time to receive that one, simply because the process of creating the service plan can take time and interaction with the court counselor in order to actually complete that. The juvenile family data information we're going to look into a little bit deeper in just a minute. And just remind yourselves and your staff that no one is permitted to share that information with another entity without prior consent. The initial consent form provided by Court Services is intended to release that information to you or your program and is not going to be effective for a secondary release of that information. So while we're all learning this new process and this new instrument, what are you going to do when you get your referral and it doesn't have what you need? We've already started seeing some of these referrals come in, and based on our time together last Thursday when we shared what we were seeing, there has been some variation between one district and another as to what you may or may not receive, like at least at this point initially. I do believe that going forward it will become more and more uniform as people all become more familiar with this process. This will be less disconcerting for you because you'll understand more about the tools that you're looking at as well. So in the meantime, if you're receiving something or some iteration of a referral that has part of what you need but not all of what you need, you can start first by reaching back out to the referring court counselor. If you are still not getting the information that you need, then contact your consultant and ask them to see if they can assist you with that process. YASI pre-screen versus the full assessment. The pre-screen is completed on all juveniles at a period intake. Those that score above low risk will need the full assessment. When you receive the YASI pre-screen, you're going to see all the questions that are asked on the full assessment. They just won't be answered if the juvenile is low risk. You'll likely only see a pre-screen for juveniles that are going to be diverted because they are, by nature, low risk juveniles. Juveniles that are adjudicated will most likely have the full assessment completed. YASI pre-screen has about a third of the questions that the YASI full assessment has, and it takes less time to administer. The full assessment contains some rather sensitive information. So, as with all court services information, you're going to treat it with the utmost confidentiality. One of the things we practiced with last fall when we were learning more about the YASI was the feedback wheel. Court counselors who have interviewed the child and family would provide a feedback wheel in their own handwriting that might have the actual offense that caused the juvenile to be involved with the court in the first place listed in the center, And there may be 2 to 3 of the areas around the wheel that become focused with the intent in the service plan of addressing those areas to reduce recidivism and to improve outcomes for the juvenile and family. Most important about the feedback wheel are the use of affirmations. These affirmations may be observed in the interview itself, a juvenile who is very respectful, for instance, or one who engages and is part of the conversation willingly without reservation might be one of the affirmations that's listed. They may have a particular interest or skill or hobby. They may have a job that they're proud of, a relationship with a caring adult that they'd like to talk about. These affirmations are positive statements on the outside of the wheel. I find to be one of the most important features of the YASI instrument itself is the actual attention to strengths of a juvenile. And it helps us as a group of folks that are working with children to help build these strengths and increase the number of strengths that a juvenile has, which will help them to be more successful. I took that same wheel and began to look at the goals and objectives under each one of these areas: free time, solving problems, beliefs and outlooks, violence and aggression, alcohol and drugs, friends and influences, school and family, because I have programs in the area that I serve that actually focus in their curriculum or in their actual program type specifically on helping to improve outcomes in these areas. And so in these areas, I've listed different deliverables and the goals and objectives. And I shared this as a handout and can do that again if you're interested. And you can take this for your particular program and go around the wheel and identify the areas that you know your program, either by curriculum or program design, is actually able to influence. For instance, a family counseling program would certainly be able to work with a family on addressing inadequate supervision or reducing aggression, verbal aggression and physical aggression in the home. Likewise, a school-based after-school program might be intently focused on school behavior, reduction of school behavior problems, or improving academic performance. Another program may be focused on the juvenile's peer group and increasing opportunities for identification with positive peer groups. So you can see probably already your wheels are turning. Well, my program is able to do that. Beliefs and outlooks. Does your program's curriculum ever address something like acceptance of responsibility? I think community service and restitution programs and how that program is all about accountability. So you can see if you decide to take on this exercise, it's an opportunity for you to go ahead and begin to identify your program or your program curriculum or both with these outcomes in this wheel and identify to the court counselors the areas that you are prepared to focus on with your programming. It may help them to make a decision about making referrals to your program if they understood that you're very deliberately with your evidence-based curriculum or with your strategies planning to impact certain features of the outcome wheel. So in the previous slide, I showed you the YASI wheel that's returned by the court counselor to the juvenile. The phrasing in that wheel is very basic and would be something that any juvenile should be able to understand pretty simply. This particular screen that I'm showing you from the casework software is the information that's returned there. You can see that it's a little bit more formal and it uses a little bit different labeling. But the overall effect of this particular assessment was one that I practiced with last fall. This juvenile was moderate risk for overall pre-screen risk. They were moderate legal history and moderate social history. And the areas that contributed to the risk and need of this particular juvenile in the sample was legal history, school, alcohol, drugs, mental health, attitudes, and adaptive skills. And so, for instance, the last two, attitudes, corresponds to beliefs and outlooks on the previous slide, that wheel that would be handed over from the court counselor to the juvenile. Instead of using the term attitudes, it is labeled beliefs and outlooks. Adaptive skills, for instance, on the previous slide is labeled problem solving or solving problems. So you can see that the strength, I believe, in the YASI wheel itself is that there's one that is available to the juvenile that would make sense to them, and then this one that is returned in the casework software that is a little bit more formal. Again, the strengths are listed on the same representation you'll see at the bottom part of the screen. This particular juvenile had low strengths, and there identified were 3 areas that there had been no risk and need noted, which was family, community, peer, aggression, and violence. Since we looked at the feedback wheel and the YASI outputs that are found in caseworks from the assessments, I also wanted to show you if a juvenile is going to have a full assessment and receive a service plan with goals and objectives, one of the worksheets that we use to develop those goals and objectives. I thought it was important because it would give you an opportunity to take a look at the language that's actually used when developing these 2 or 3 goals and objectives to help reduce problem behaviors or recidivism. First, you're to identify the pattern of behavior that needs to change, and they even prompt you to state that as an ing, a word that ends in ing. Then you're to look for internal or external triggers. The juvenile, through the process of motivational interviewing, will help you to define what those triggers are, and then what the intent and motivation behind the behavior is, and then finally, what incentives does the client actually have to make changes. And again, that goes back to some of those strengths and some of those affirmations, ways to identify those with this particular change talk and changing of behavior to motivate juveniles to actually make those changes. I've been speaking with programs that are working, for instance, with juveniles right now that are very high risk, very difficult to engage. Some of them are much older. It's becoming very evident to programs that are working now with the Raise the Age population how challenging it can be. And so in the course of that conversation, I asked, what does this juvenile like? What would incentivize him or her to do something that you needed them to do? And the answer was they like artwork. They're very artistic and they like artwork. And so out of that incentive, we kind of started to, I went back and relied on this particular worksheet and some of the pointers here to help problem solve with that person a strategy that we might use with an older teen to get them to comply with what they need to do in order to be successful. So again, I wanted you to see this because I wanted you to be able to understand what this language is, that it is somewhat different from what we've been used to, and I believe it is one of the strengths of the YASI instrument and the YASI process for assessment and case planning. Now I'm going to quickly cover some screenshots from NC Join as well as from the YASI assessment outputs, and I just wanted to share some pointers with you that will help you understand from a court counselor's point of view how it can be a little bit challenging to provide, for instance, the YASI pre-screen numeric score after you've already been over in caseworks creating the actual assessment itself. It's not impossible, but it just gives you a little bit of insight as to what may be challenging for them as they are learning this whole process. This is a screenshot of the NC Join juvenile profile. You click on assessments. If you're a court counselor, you roll down, you will see YASI. It's circled there. When you click on that YASI icon, it takes you to another screen. If there have been previous YASI assessments in the system, they'll be listed there. If not, there's going to be a create assessment link there for you to be able to get started. When you press that link, it basically directs you out of NC Join and over into Caseworks, which is the software that the YASI assessment is found in. So now we've pressed on the YASI button. It has taken us to the next screen. We've pressed the Create Assessment button, and it's taken us to Caseworks. When you get into the Caseworks software, it's important to remember that the YASI pre-screen score is not displayed on the report output in Caseworks itself. the court counselor has to look back in NC Join to obtain the numeric score. I'm told by our court services partners who have kind of helped coach us through this process that it is pretty instantaneous back in the NC Join screen, but they do have to look back over there to actually see that numeric score in the previous screen that actually was the portal that got them into Caseworks in the first place. I just wanted to also throw in the report outputs from Caseworks, the pre-screen results, full assessment results, mapping, pre-screen items, full assessment items, domain goals, and service plan. All of these are created in a PDF format. You are not going to receive all of these as part of the referral packet, but I did want you to see what the system is able to generate. And again, try to remember that in the Caseworks software, the low, moderate, and high return is going to be visualized, but you would not see the numeric score in Caseworks. It's just not designed to produce that numeric value on that side. That is residing over in NC Join. I'll pretend for a minute that I'm an intake counselor. I've just completed the YASI full assessment over in Caseworks and have exited Caseworks and come back to NC Join. And here is where I'm going to see this value of pre-screen 6 points or a return of low. That will be put on the referral form. You'll get that referral form if you're the program that I'm referring to. When you go to enter that into NC Allies in the YASI field, you're going to enter the numeric value of 6, and then NC Allies likewise will return low risk. At this point, I just want to remind you that the pre-screen numeric value is found here and in one other place in NC Join that we'll show you in just a minute. And that was with much gratitude, I thank our court services partners who actually pointed this out to us and helped us to figure this out. Because I think it's important for you to also know where this is found and where this resides. And as promised, another way to get to the score in NC Join and have it available in the referral materials themselves is found in the Juvenile Family Data Sheet link in NC Join. You can see that off to the left there in the report drop-downs, the JFDS/court report. When you click on that and fan it out and open it up, it brings you to the screen. There is a tab here for YASI assessments. If you are wanting that numeric value to print in the report itself, you would check that box that you see there circled. And when you do that, it's going to not only show you the numeric score here in this particular tab, but it's also going to be viewable in the printed materials that come out from the court report. When a court counselor chooses the print option in that Juvenile Family Data Sheet link, if that box has been checked, then the score is going to display on page 4 of 5. So if you ever get a referral form and the actual YASI field has nothing in it, or it just says low or moderate or high, you can go over to the Juvenile Family Data Sheet report itself and possibly get this information from that report. And this is an actual screenshot of that report in its printable format. I thank you for your attention. I'm sorry that the WebEx that we recorded has not been widely available as I would like for it to have been. So I re-recorded this. The intention was to keep it under 30 minutes. We managed to do that. YASI is new to everyone. Court services staff are receiving ongoing training and coaching in this. I'm really astonished at the level of work that has gone into implementing this statewide, from the training that went on last fall through the actual rollout. We're so much further along than it seems possible considering the magnitude of this task. And I know this is a little disconcerting and frustrating for you when you're getting these materials for the first time and you're really not sure of what you're looking at and how that is going to help inform the services that you're going to design in your service plan for a juvenile. But the big plus for Juvenile Crime Prevention Council and contractual programs is that YASI focuses on juvenile strengths in a way that has never been captured before. for juveniles on caseload, the mapping that sets up the goals and objectives is also going to provide some really relevant information that will assist you in service planning. And if you want to take some time to spend on that YASI feedback wheel on those domains and those prompts within those domains, I believe you will find that your program is going to match and be able to provide some very relevant services for kids and families going forward. Thank you.